She was not the kind of person who usually stood at the hotel's front desk. Her role had always been behind the scenes, working in the small office where she checked records, balanced numbers, and made sure everything ran smoothly. The reception was the place where the confident, polished staff stood, greeting strangers with easy smiles. She admired them from a distance but never imagined herself in that position. Yet that evening, fate had written something different for her. The receptionist who normally worked the evening shift had called in sick at the last minute. The manager rushed into the office, looking worried and slightly desperate. "We don't have anyone else," he said. "Can you help out at the desk tonight? Just for a few hours." She hesitated. She had never handled guests directly. Numbers and paperwork were safe, people were unpredictable. Still, something in her heart told her to say yes. She nodded, though her hands already felt nervous. When she stepped behind the desk for the first time, she felt her pulse quicken. The polished marble counter, the shining brass bell, and the quiet hum of conversation in the lobby all made her feel like she had stepped onto a stage. Every guest who walked in seemed to look straight at her, and she reminded herself to breathe. She tied her hair back neatly, straightened her uniform, and tried to copy the professional smile she had seen the others wear so effortlessly. The first hour passed slowly. A family arrived, tired from traveling with restless children. She checked their reservation carefully, gave them their keys, and answered their questions about breakfast. The parents looked grateful, the children soon cheered up, and the family disappeared into the elevator. She let out a quiet sigh of relief. Maybe this wasn't as impossible as she had thought. More guests came and went. Some were polite, some impatient, some too busy looking at their phones to notice her nervousness. With each interaction, she learned a little more. She learned how to stay calm when someone complained about their room. She learned how to smile warmly at a couple asking for restaurant recommendations. She learned how to keep her voice steady even when her heart raced. Every small success built her confidence, though inside she still felt like she was only pretending to belong there. The clock ticked on, and as the evening grew later, the lobby became quieter. A few business travelers walked through, checking in quickly, more interested in finishing emails than in talking to her. She handled their requests with practiced politeness. Then, for a brief moment, she found herself standing alone at the desk. She leaned slightly on the counter, watching the chandelier lights shimmer above her. The silence felt peaceful, like a pause between chapters of a book. She didn't know that the next chapter of her life was about to begin right there. The doors of the hotel opened again, and a man stepped inside. She noticed him immediately, not because of his clothes, though they were neat and expensive, but because of the way he carried himself. He walked with a quiet confidence, not hurried, not arrogant, but with the air of someone who had seen much of the world. His eyes moved slowly across the lobby before resting on her. She straightened at once, her professional smile returning, though her nerves threatened to betray her. He approached the desk, setting down a leather bag that looked well-traveled but well-kept. His voice was calm, deep, and steady when he spoke. "Good evening. I'd like to check in." She greeted him politely, taking his name and searching through the reservation list. Her fingers trembled slightly on the keyboard, though she hoped he wouldn't notice. As she handed him the form to sign, she glanced up. For a moment, their eyes met, and she was struck not by his appearance, but by the kindness in his gaze. He didn't look at her as though she were just another hotel worker. He looked at her as if he was genuinely present in the moment, as if he saw her. It lasted only a few seconds, then she looked away, embarrassed by her own thoughts. She reminded herself to stay professional. Guests came and went every day, and he was no different. She gave him the keycard with a polite explanation about the breakfast hours and the facilities. He thanked her warmly, his smile brief but sincere, before heading toward the elevator. When he disappeared upstairs, She exhaled deeply, realizing she had been holding her breath. Something about the encounter left her unsettled in a strange but pleasant way. She tried to push it from her mind, telling herself it was nothing more than another guest checking in. But even as she attended to the next person who arrived, her thoughts kept wandering back to him. The shift stretched on. She grew more comfortable as the night continued, though the memory of the calm, confident man lingered in her mind. She didn't know his name beyond what she had typed into the system. She didn't know his story, his life, or his purpose for being there. And she certainly didn't know that he was not just another traveler passing through the hotel. He was someone whose presence in her life would soon mean far more than a reservation in the system. By the time her shift ended, she felt exhausted yet strangely fulfilled. She had faced her fears, taken on a role she never thought she could handle, and somehow made it through. The marble counter that had seemed intimidating at the beginning of the evening now felt like a place she could belong, at least for a while. As she walked out into the cool night air, she thought about the strange twists of life. One small decision, one moment of saying yes when she could have said no, had led her here. She had no way of knowing that the man she had checked in tonight would not be just another guest fading into memory. He would be the beginning of a story she could never have imagined, a story that would change her life forever. The next evening when she arrived for work, she was calmer than before. The nerves of standing at the front desk had softened a little, and she reminded herself that she had managed well the night before. Still, there was a quiet voice inside her that kept whispering about the man she had checked in. She couldn't explain why, but his presence had left a trace in her memory. It wasn't because of his polished appearance or the confidence with which he carried himself, but because of the way he had looked at her like she wasn't invisible. She had grown used to being someone who stayed in the background, but for a brief moment at that desk, she felt seen. The lobby was busier than usual that night. A group of tourists had just arrived, excited voices echoing through the hall as they carried colorful bags and snapped pictures of the chandelier. She welcomed them warmly, carefully assigning rooms, and answering their endless questions about nearby attractions. It was tiring but pleasant. She liked the way her smile seemed to calm tired travelers. She liked being helpful. Hours passed, and she began to settle into the rhythm of her shift. Then, just as she finished handing a key to a guest, she noticed a familiar figure walking across the lobby. It was him. He was dressed differently this time, more casual, wearing a light jacket and holding a book under his arm. He walked without hurry, and when he reached the desk, his eyes lit up with a hint of recognition. "Good evening again," he said, his voice warm and steady. She smiled, more naturally this time. "Good evening, sir. How was your stay so far?" He placed the book on the counter and leaned slightly forward, as if he had no rush. "It's been good. Quiet. I took a walk around the city today." "Do you usually live here?" His question caught her off guard. Guests rarely asked her anything personal. Usually, they wanted directions, recommendations, or extra towels. But this man seemed genuinely interested. She hesitated, then answered softly, "Yes. I've lived here all my life." He nodded thoughtfully, as though her words mattered. "Then you must know the city well. Can you suggest a place to eat that isn't too crowded?" Her eyes brightened. She loved sharing little-known places with visitors. She told him about a small cafe a few streets away, known mostly to locals, where the food was simple but made with care. As she described it, she noticed the way he listened closely, not interrupting, not looking at his phone, just listening. It made her feel strangely valued, like her words carried weight. "Sounds perfect," he said with a smile. "I'll try it tomorrow." Their conversation lingered for a few more minutes. He asked about the city's old market, about how people lived here, and about what she liked most about her work. She answered shyly at first, then more openly, forgetting for a while that she was just a hotel receptionist and he was just a guest. It felt almost like talking to an old friend. A colleague walked past the desk, giving her a curious look. She quickly straightened, realizing she might be chatting too long. The man seemed to notice and gave a polite nod. "I'll let you get back to work. Thank you for the suggestions." He picked up his book and left, walking toward the elevator. For the rest of the evening, she found herself smiling without even knowing it. She reminded herself he was just another guest, one of many who would pass through the hotel, yet there was something different about him. His presence lingered in her thoughts long after he had gone upstairs. The following day, she tried to push the memory aside. She focused on her duties, checking in families, answering calls, solving small issues with rooms, and making sure guests were comfortable. But when evening came again, she found herself glancing toward the entrance every now and then, as if expecting him. And then, almost as if he could hear her thoughts, he appeared once more. This time, he wasn't carrying a book but a small paper bag. He approached the desk with the same calm confidence, and she noticed something unusual. He seemed almost pleased to see her. "I tried that cafe you recommended," he said, placing the bag gently on the counter. "It was as good as you said. I brought something for you." She blinked in surprise as he pushed the bag toward her. Inside were a few pastries from the cafe, neatly wrapped. Her first instinct was to refuse politely. It wasn't common for staff to accept gifts from guests. But when she looked up and saw the sincerity in his eyes, she hesitated. He wasn't trying to impress her or make her uncomfortable. He was simply being kind. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying more gratitude than she intended. He smiled and leaned against the counter as though he had all the time in the world. "You were right. The place had a warm feeling. I wouldn't have found it without your advice." She smiled back, and once again, their conversation began to flow naturally. He spoke about his travels, about the cities he had visited, and the lessons he had learned along the way. She listened with fascination. His stories were not told with pride but with humility, as though he valued the experiences more than the luxury. In return, he asked about her life. She told him little pieces about her childhood in the city, about how she had ended up working at the hotel, about her dream of one day doing something bigger, though she didn't quite know what. She expected him to brush off her words politely, but instead, he listened with genuine interest, as though her dreams mattered just as much as anyone else's. As the days went by, their short conversations became a quiet routine. He would often stop by the desk, sometimes to ask for recommendations, sometimes just to chat for a few minutes before heading upstairs. She tried to stay professional, but she couldn't deny that she looked forward to those moments. Her colleagues began to notice too. One of them whispered teasingly, "You've got a regular visitor," but she brushed it off, pretending it meant nothing. Inside, though, she knew it was something unusual, something she couldn't quite put into words. What she still didn't know was who he truly was. To her, he was simply a kind, well-traveled guest with a gentle smile and patient eyes. She had no idea that behind his calm presence was a man of great wealth and influence. She didn't know that he was not just passing through the city but was quietly observing, deciding where his next steps in life would lead. All she knew was that, for the first time in a long while, her work felt more meaningful. She no longer counted the hours of her shift, she found herself looking forward to them. Because somewhere in those hours, there would be a moment when he would walk through the lobby, and for a little while, she would forget she was just filling in. She had no way of knowing that these conversations, these simple exchanges over a counter, were slowly weaving a bond that would soon change everything. Life, with all its unpredictability, had brought her to the reception desk by chance. But sometimes, chance is only the beginning of destiny. The days began to follow a new rhythm, though she didn't notice it at first. Her shifts at the reception desk no longer felt like a temporary duty, they felt like moments she wanted to hold on to. Each evening, After the rush of arrivals and check-ins, she would find herself waiting, half expecting him to appear. And more often than not, he did. He never came in with noise or drama, never with the impatience of some wealthy travelers. Instead, he arrived with quiet footsteps, a calm smile, and words that always seemed to matter. One evening, after a long day filled with difficult guests, she was feeling drained. A guest had complained loudly about his room, another had been rude about the wait time, and she had tried her best to stay patient. Her smile, which usually came naturally, was starting to feel heavy. Just when she thought she couldn't manage another strained conversation, she saw him walking toward the desk. His presence felt like a breath of calm air. "You look tired," he said gently, noticing the faint shadows beneath her eyes. She gave a small laugh. "It's been a long evening. Some days are harder than others." He leaned slightly on the counter, his expression thoughtful. "It shows strength, you know. To stay kind even when others are not." No one had ever said that to her before. She felt a warmth in her chest, as if his words had reached a part of her that had long been overlooked. They talked for a while, and little by little, the weight of her difficult evening seemed to lift. He asked about her day not out of politeness, but out of real care, and she found herself opening up more than she usually would. Their conversations grew deeper with time. At first, it was about simple things: food, books, places to see in the city. But slowly, he began asking about her dreams. One night, when the lobby was nearly empty, he asked, "If you could do anything in the world, without limits, what would it be?" She hesitated. It felt strange to speak about dreams in front of someone who seemed so accomplished. Still, his eyes encouraged her, steady and kind. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I've always wanted to do something meaningful. Something beyond this desk. Maybe work in a field where I can help people, where I can grow. But life doesn't always make it easy." He nodded as if he understood completely. Dreams don't always come with a straight road. But sometimes, the road finds you when you least expect it. His words stayed with her long after he went upstairs. She thought about them while walking home that night, about how strange it was to have someone believe in her potential when even she doubted it at times. As the days went by, other guests noticed his familiarity with her. Some assumed he was an old friend, others simply ignored it, but her colleagues whispered quietly about the bond forming between the receptionist and the distinguished guest. She tried to brush it off, but inside she couldn't deny the truth: she felt a growing connection, one that surprised her every time she caught herself smiling at the thought of him. One evening, he invited her to sit for a few minutes in the hotel lounge after her shift. She was hesitant. It wasn't usual for staff to spend time with guests outside of work. But his manner was respectful, never pressuring, and something inside told her this was different. She agreed. They sat near the large window where the city lights sparkled like stars scattered across the ground. He asked her about her childhood, about the small joys that had shaped her, and she found herself sharing stories she had never told anyone outside her family. He listened as though each detail mattered, as though her life was a book worth reading. In return, he began to share parts of his own story. He spoke of traveling across continents, of building businesses, of moments of success and moments of failure. He spoke without pride, without arrogance. He spoke like someone who had learned that money and success were not the only measures of a life well lived. She realized then that he was not just a traveler. There was something much larger behind his calm presence. Still, he never once mentioned wealth or status. To her, he remained simply the kind guest who listened, who cared, and who saw her not as an employee but as a person with dreams worth noticing. But with every new closeness came a new uncertainty. She began to wonder why he gave her so much of his time. She was, after all, just a receptionist filling in. Guests came and went, often without remembering her name. Why was he different? Did he see something in her that she couldn't see in herself? The answer began to take shape one late evening when he returned from a meeting. He looked more serious than usual, his eyes carrying a quiet weight. Yet when he saw her, his expression softened. "You remind me of myself years ago," he said suddenly. She tilted her head, surprised. "Me? But our lives seem so different." He shook his head gently. "Not as different as you think. I started with very little. I worked in places where no one knew my name, where no one cared about my dreams. But I held on to them, and step by step, I built a path." His words struck something deep within her. She had always assumed people like him had been born into opportunities, but hearing that he too had started from small beginnings gave her hope. That night, as she walked home, her thoughts were alive with possibilities. Could it be true that her life, too, could change if she held on, if she believed in herself? She had spent so long thinking she was destined to stay in the shadows, but now, a new light seemed to be shining on her path. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, though it remained wrapped in the quiet dignity of mutual respect. He never crossed boundaries, never made her feel uncomfortable, but always left her with words that inspired her, words that made her believe her future could hold more than she had imagined. What she did not know was that he had already begun to think about how he could help her. Behind his calm conversations and gentle encouragement was a decision forming in his mind. He saw in her something rare: an honesty, a kindness, a determination that even she did not fully recognize yet. He knew that with the right opportunity, she could rise far beyond the reception desk. For now, though, she remained unaware. To her, it was enough to have someone who listened, someone who made her believe that her dreams mattered. She continued to greet guests with warmth, to face each long shift with patience, but in her heart, she carried a new sense of hope. And while she did not yet know it, the path ahead was about to open in ways she could never have imagined. What had begun as chance conversations across a marble desk was slowly becoming the foundation of a future that would change both their lives. The connection between them had grown so naturally that she almost forgot it had started with nothing more than a guest signing into the hotel system. Each evening brought a new conversation, a new exchange of thoughts, and a deeper sense of understanding. What surprised her most was not just how much she enjoyed his company but how much she was learning from him without even realizing it. His words carried lessons, his stories carried wisdom, and the way he listened made her feel as though her life mattered just as much as his. One evening, he returned from a business dinner later than usual. She noticed the faint weariness in his eyes, though he carried it with his usual calm grace. When he reached the desk, he didn't start with small talk. Instead, he placed a folder gently on the counter. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone quiet but steady. "You have qualities I rarely see: patience, kindness, a sense of responsibility, and a mind that looks for more than what's in front of you. These are qualities that cannot be taught, but they can be guided. And I believe you deserve a chance to grow." She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "What do you mean?" He tapped the folder lightly. "I run businesses in several countries. I meet many people, but very few stand out. You do. I want to offer you a position with my company. Not here at the reception desk, but in a role where you can learn, develop, and build a future." Her first reaction was disbelief. She looked at him, trying to measure his sincerity. Opportunities like this didn't just appear out of nowhere, especially not for someone like her, who had never stepped beyond the quiet routines of her city life. "Are you serious?" she asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. He smiled gently. "I don't make such offers lightly. I've been observing, not just how you treat me, but how you treat everyone who walks through those doors. That kind of sincerity cannot be faked. I believe you could go far if you allow yourself the chance." Her hands trembled slightly as she held the folder. Inside were details: an outline of the position, the training it would involve, and the opportunities that could follow. It was overwhelming. She closed the folder quickly, her heart racing. This is too much. I don't know if I can do something like this. I don't have the education or experience people usually need. He shook his head. Experience can be gained. Skills can be learned. What matters most is character, and you already have that. Don't let fear decide your future. For the rest of her shift, she could hardly focus. His offer echoed in her mind. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a sea of possibilities, not knowing if she would sink or fly. When her shift ended, she carried the folder home, holding it close as though it might vanish if she let go. That night, sleep escaped her. She lay awake thinking of what this could mean. Part of her wanted to cling to the safety of her current life, even if it wasn't perfect. Another part, a voice deep inside, whispered that this might be the chance she had been waiting for, the door she had never dared to knock on now standing open in front of her. The next evening when she saw him again, she hadn't made a decision. He noticed the uncertainty in her expression immediately. "It's all right to take time," he said kindly. "Big choices are never made in a hurry. But I want you to know something: this isn't just an opportunity for me to help you. This is an opportunity for you to help yourself. You deserve it." She swallowed hard, feeling emotions she couldn't name. Gratitude, fear, hope all tangled together. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Out of all the people you meet, why choose me?" His answer was simple but powerful. "Because you don't even realize how much you're worth. And people like that often shine the brightest once they're given the chance." Those words sank deep into her heart. She had lived her life quietly, often doubting herself, often believing she wasn't extraordinary. But here was someone who saw value in her where she had seen none. That belief felt like a gift, one she didn't want to waste. Days turned into a week as she wrestled with the decision. She spoke with her family, who encouraged her cautiously, though they too found it hard to believe such an opportunity had come so suddenly. She thought about leaving the safety of what she knew, about the risks of stepping into a world so different from hers. But she also thought about the long nights she had dreamed of more, of becoming someone she could be proud of. Finally, one evening, as he stood at the desk again, she looked him in the eye with a new steadiness. "I'll do it," she said softly but firmly. "I'll take the chance." A slow smile spread across his face, one of quiet satisfaction. "Good," he said. "You won't regret it." The next days moved quickly. He arranged the details, guiding her patiently through every step. She noticed how carefully he handled everything, never rushing her, always making sure she understood. It wasn't just an opportunity he was offering, it was guidance, mentorship, and faith. When the day came for her to leave the hotel and step into her new role, she stood for a long moment behind the reception desk, looking at the marble counter that had once terrified her. It was here she had first faced her fears, here she had first spoken to the man who had changed her life, here she had discovered the strength she hadn't known she carried. As she packed her few belongings, her colleagues hugged her, some with envy, some with genuine happiness. They all said the same thing: how lucky she was. She smiled, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just luck. It was also courage. Courage to say yes when fear wanted her to say no. Her first day in the new role was a mix of nerves and excitement. The office was larger, the responsibilities more serious, and the people around her seemed far more experienced. Yet she carried with her the words he had spoken: experience can be gained, skills can be learned, but character matters most. She reminded herself of that every time doubt crept in. He didn't hover, but he was always nearby, guiding her when she stumbled, encouraging her when she hesitated. He treated her not as someone beneath him, but as someone worthy of growth. Slowly, she began to believe it too. In the quiet of the evenings, When she thought back on how everything had started, she marveled at the chain of events. One sick colleague, one unexpected shift at the reception desk, one chance meeting with a guest who was not just another traveler. Life had placed her in the right place at the right time, but it was her willingness to step forward that had allowed the story to unfold. She knew challenges lay ahead. The new path wouldn't be easy. But she also knew that she was no longer the same person who had nervously stood at the front desk that first night. She was stronger now, braver, and ready to face what came next. And as she sat in her new office, looking at the folder that had once scared her, she realized it had become more than an opportunity. It had become the doorway to a new life. A life she would never have found if she hadn't filled in as a hotel receptionist on that ordinary evening. Her life had changed more quickly than she could have ever imagined. The quiet days of working behind the scenes at the hotel were now only a memory, and the long evenings at the reception desk that once made her nervous had become the stepping stone to something greater. Now she found herself in an office filled with opportunities, challenges, and lessons. At first, it all felt overwhelming: new systems to learn, new colleagues to meet, new responsibilities that carried more weight than anything she had handled before. Yet, despite her nerves, she carried with her a steady confidence that hadn't been there before. Every time doubt whispered in her mind, she remembered his words. He had told her that experience could be gained, that skills could be learned, but that character mattered most. Those words became her guide. When tasks seemed too big, she reminded herself that she didn't have to know everything at once. She just had to stay willing to learn, to grow step by step. At first, some colleagues looked at her with curiosity, even skepticism. They wondered how someone with her background had stepped into this world. She could feel their questions hanging silently in the air, but she didn't let them shake her. Instead, she worked harder. She arrived early, stayed late, asked questions, and listened carefully. Slowly, the same people who had doubted her began to respect her. They saw her dedication, her kindness, and her ability to handle challenges calmly, and in time they accepted her fully as part of the team. Through it all, he remained nearby, not as someone watching over her every move, but as a mentor who stepped in when she needed guidance. He never made her feel small, never reminded her of what she lacked, but always reminded her of what she could become. That balance gave her the courage to keep moving forward, even when the road was difficult. Months passed, and with each passing week, she felt herself changing. She was no longer the shy woman who doubted her worth. She was growing into someone who could stand in meetings with confidence, share her ideas without fear, and take responsibility for projects that once would have terrified her. She discovered strengths she hadn't known she had, and slowly, she began to dream even bigger than before. Her family watched with pride as she shared pieces of her journey with them. They had always wanted her to be happy, but they had never imagined she would rise so quickly. To them, she was living proof that life could turn around in the most unexpected ways, that one single decision could change the path of an entire future. She often thought back to that first night at the reception desk, the night she had filled in without knowing it would become the turning point of her life. She remembered the nervousness, the trembling hands, the smile she forced onto her face. And she remembered the moment he had walked in, calm and confident, unaware that their meeting would spark something far greater than either of them could see at the time. Her story was no longer just her own. Friends and colleagues began to notice the transformation in her and often asked her how she had managed it. She would smile and say softly, "Sometimes life gives you an unexpected chance. The hardest part is believing you deserve to take it." The more she grew, the more she realized that her journey wasn't only about her career. It was about finding her own worth. For so long she had believed she was ordinary, that her role in life was small and unremarkable. But now she knew that everyone carried something extraordinary inside them. It just needed the right moment, the right opportunity, to be revealed. In time, her role expanded further. She began leading small teams, guiding new employees with the same patience and kindness she had once shown guests at the hotel desk. She treated everyone with respect, no matter their background, because she remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. Her leadership style was not about commanding but about lifting others, and people responded with loyalty and admiration. One evening, after a long day, she sat across from him in the office. He looked at her with quiet pride. "Do you see now what I saw in you?" he asked. She smiled, her eyes shining. "I think I'm beginning to. But more than that, I've learned to see it in myself." He nodded, satisfied. "That is the most important lesson. Because once you see your own worth, no one can take it away from you." His words stayed with her like a promise, echoing in her heart. She knew that his role in her life had been more than just giving her a job. He had given her belief, a belief that had changed everything. Years later, when she looked back on her journey, she often shared her story with others. She spoke not as someone who had been given everything, but as someone who had once been in a small corner of a hotel, nervous and unsure, waiting for life to pass quietly. She told them about the power of kindness, the importance of courage, and the way a single meeting could change an entire future. People listened, inspired by the simplicity of her truth. She never forgot where it all began. Sometimes she would walk past the hotel lobby where she had once stood, remembering the marble counter, the chandelier lights, and the way her hands had shaken that first night. It felt like another lifetime, yet it was still part of her. Without that night, she would never have met the man who saw her potential, and without him, she might never have discovered it herself. Her life had become more than she had ever imagined. But what made it truly beautiful was not just the success, the new career, or the recognition she gained. What made it beautiful was the journey of discovering her own strength, of realizing that she was capable of far more than she had believed. And in every corner of her heart, she carried gratitude for the chance she had been given, for the guidance she had received, and for the courage she had found within herself to say yes when it mattered most. Her story became a reminder to everyone who heard it: sometimes life changes in the smallest, quietest moments. A simple choice to help out. A conversation with a stranger. A smile that lingers. No one can predict when destiny will appear, but when it does, the key is to step forward bravely. For her, it all began on an ordinary evening when she filled in as a hotel receptionist. She hadn't known that night that she would check in a guest who was far more than he appeared. She hadn't known that he would see in her what she couldn't see in herself. And she hadn't known that their meeting would change her life forever. But that is the way life often works: unexpected, surprising, and filled with possibilities waiting to be discovered. And her journey stood as proof that even the simplest beginnings can lead to extraordinary endings.